Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm the newsman, Sam Sachs. It's that Friday show. Good morning to everyone. And a special shout out to those who were not just convicted of 34 felonies related to hush money payments to cover up an affair and influence an election. Not so fast, Donald. Yes, my friends, yesterday history was made. A dang Cheeto was convicted. Folks, we got him. Former President Donald Trump was found guilty by a Manhattan jury on 34 charges related to his attempt to hide 2016 campaign expenditures that went to suppressing a story about an affair he had with porn star Stormy Daniels. He's the first U.S. president to ever be found guilty of felony crimes. Liberals around the country are rejoicing. Conservatives are melting down, and the left, we're having a laugh, cracking jokes online. Because ultimately, it's still unclear if this verdict actually changes anything. Jail time is not at all guaranteed, and depending on what legal observers you ask, it's unlikely. Trump's sentencing will be handed down by Judge Juan Merchan following a hearing scheduled for July 11th. Just a few days before Trump is set to officially be nominated at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which could be a bit of an awkward affair. Judge Merchan also has a variety of sentencing options other than jail time, including probation and community service, which personally I'm rooting for because I know there's nothing Trump would hate more than putting on a reflective vest and picking up trash on the highway for 1,200 hours. At a time when the former president should probably be showing deference to the guy who will eventually sentence him, Trump attacked the court and the judge after the verdict, calling it rigged and corrupt. Even the most minor sentence, probation, will be a headache for Trump, who will have to have his travel restricted and seek permission from a probation officer to hit the campaign trail. Now, no matter what sentence he receives, though, Trump will still be competitive in the upcoming election. In fact, his supporters seem even more enthused, crashing several fundraising websites. And even though he's facing numerous other charges related to mishandling of classified documents and trying to steal the 2020 election, charges that are far more serious than the ones he was just convicted on in Manhattan, it's not clear if Trump will actually face trial on that stuff before the election. So Trump being found guilty in this case is not at all a deus ex machina for Democrats. The party will still need to beat him at the ballot box in November. Now, some have correctly noted the absurdity that other U.S. presidents have committed far more serious crimes and not gone to jail or even been charged. But now is not the time to lament what could have been. It's the time to build the world we want to see. One in which every president of the American empire is eventually thrown in prison for high crimes. And that starts with the ICC issuing arrest warrants for Joe Biden for complicity in a genocide. Which brings us to our next story. Two more resignations in the administration over Biden's Gaza policy, this time with allegations that the State Department is covering up Israeli war crimes. The Guardian reported that Alexander Smith, a contractor for the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, was, quote, given a choice between resignation and dismissal after preparing a presentation on maternal and child mortality among Palestinians, which was canceled at the last minute by USAID leadership last week. In a letter to USAID Administrator Samantha Power, Smith, who worked at the agency for 4 years, wrote, quote, I cannot do my job in an environment in which specific people cannot be acknowledged as fully human, or where gender and human rights principles apply to some, but not to others, depending on their race. Samantha Power, meanwhile, tweeted how humanitarian partners working in Gaza are saying that conditions are worse now than they've ever been before. That Israeli military operations in closed crossings are making it extremely difficult to distribute aid, as though that's just the consequences of a war and not a deliberate strategy by the Israeli military. Also, Power works in an administration that defunded the largest operating relief agency in Gaza, UNRWA, over lies spread by the Israeli government. So this is your fault too, Samantha. Also this week, a resignation from a career official within the State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. Stacey Gilbert quit over claims the department made to Congress earlier this month that Israel was not deliberately blocking humanitarian aid. Gilbert described the claim as patently false and discussed how staffers' conclusions were overruled by higher-ups in the department. Israel is very obviously blocking aid from reaching Gaza as part of its collective punishment siege strategy, but higher-ups at the State Department won't admit that in order to preserve future arms sales to the rogue state. These are the 8th and 9th resignations over Biden's support for the genocide in Gaza. Josh Paul was the first official to quit in protest. He worked at the State Department, and he reacted to the news of these latest resignations by saying they're symptomatic of a deliberate cover-up in the administration. Quote, "This is not just a story of bureaucratic complicity or ineptitude. There are people signing off on arms transfers, people drafting arms transfer approval memos, people turning a blind eye or opting to be marked as info or no response on those memos, people in meetings with the secretary, with assistant secretaries, with deputy assistant secretaries who could be speaking up, people who have an immense responsibility to do good and a lifelong commitment to human rights, whose choice is to let the bureaucracy function as though it were business as usual." Meanwhile, in addition to providing diplomatic cover to Israel's genocide, the Biden White House is also bombing Yemen for having the audacity to take actions to stop that genocide. American and British warplanes struck more than a dozen targets overnight, killing an estimated 16 people. It's the 5th time the US and the UK have bombed Yemen since January as punishment for Houthi forces disrupting commerce in the Red Sea to pressure Israel to end its ethnic cleansing campaign. Student workers are striking across the University of California system, protesting unfair labor practices and the school's investments in Israeli apartheid. It's the first major work stoppage in the U.S. related to the genocide in Gaza. The strike began on May 20th after an overwhelming majority of members of UAW Local 4811, which represents 48,000 student workers in the UC system, authorized a picket. The union is pursuing a stand-up strike strategy where portions of the rank and file go on strike at strategic times. It started with about 2,000 workers at UC Santa Cruz, and this week another 12,000 workers joined the strike from UCLA and UC Davis. The union filed unfair labor practice charges against several UC schools related to mass arrests against members who were just exercising their First Amendment rights to protest their school's complicity in what's happening in Gaza. Local 4811 President Rafael Jaime told In These Times that the university violated their rights by, quote, allowing a violent mob to attack workers, to brutalize them, mace them, burn their skin with fireworks, and then the very next day sending in cops to violently suppress the peaceful protests using rubber bullets and flashbang grenades. The union is demanding the university take a number of actions in order to resolve the strike, including amnesty for all academic employees, students, student groups, faculty, and staff who face disciplinary action or arrest due to the protest, a commitment to protect free speech and political expression on campus, divestment from the university's known investments in weapons manufacturers, military contractors, and companies profiting from Israel's war on Gaza, disclosure of all funding sources and grants, and allowing researchers to opt out from funding sources tied to the military or oppression of Palestinians. Strikers are calling on support from other unions. A member of 4811 named Peter called into the Valley Labor Report this week to discuss solidarity from across the labor movement with the strike action.
We have, I think it's around 10 unions at the University of California, but we all, have our own contracts and we go out separately. But rank and file workers in UPD and AFT and AFSCME have supported us. Roofers Union, ATU, I've seen a couple of rank and file members here and there. So, I think we have to sort of all go out together when, an injury to one is an injury to all. So, I would call on, workers in other unions to join our picket lines and join the strike.
Now, so far, University of California administrators aren't playing ball. The school initially declared the strike illegal and threatened to punish participants. But the California Public Employment Relations Board, which oversees labor disputes among public workers in the state, did not issue an injunction to stop the strike, thus allowing it to continue. It's Friday, time to name and shame some rich dicks. Thanks for all the nominations on social media. Arona got in their nomination for All the Goddamn Landlords. Thank you, Arona. Nora nominated Genocide Joe following the tent massacre in Rafah conducted by the Israeli military with US-made bombs. Also got a nomination here for Genocide Justin, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, whose government is also supporting Israel's ethnic cleansing in Gaza. The Wolf nominated RFK Jr., who is trying to shore up support on the right by defending Confederate monuments. There's a nomination for Sarah Hubbard, the chair of the Board of Regents at the University of Michigan, for praising the cops for clearing an anti-genocide protest on campus. "We've taken back University of Michigan," she wrote triumphantly. What a scumbag. And Mailman Paul this week nominated, quote, all of them. All of the rich dicks should be rich dicks. Can't argue with that. Thank you for all the nominations. In the end, I narrowed it down to just one person, though. This week's rich dick is Sean McGuire. McGuire is a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, crypto and AI hype man, best bud of Elon Musk, and a partner at Sequoia Capital Operations, which lately has been investing in and helping to inflate companies we don't need and are better off without, like fast fashion retailer Shein, known for its toxic clothes and forced labor. Also, Bolt, some sort of rideshare and delivery company in Estonia, and most notably, cryptocurrency exchange FTX, which went on to collapse under the weight of its own crimes. Sean personally oversees investments in bangers like Elon Musk's Twitter, I refuse to call it X, and Musk's The Boring Company, which isn't so much a company as a sleight of hand trick to get local officials to not invest in public transportation and thus help Elon sell more cars. Also, McGuire invested in some company called TipLink, which, quote, enables users to send crypto or NFTs with just a link. Ah, well, thank God that exists. He's also seeded various drone and weapons companies. All of this stuff is good enough to be a rich dick, but on top of all that, McGuire is a self-described Zionist who over the last several months has enthusiastically supported the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. He's spread Pallywood conspiracies to deny the high Palestinian death count. He's tweeted praise for war criminal Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's accused protesting college students in the U.S. of working alongside Iran. He's shared comically bad Israeli disinformation while also complaining about living in a post-truth world. And just this week, McGuire was casting doubt on the tent massacre in Rafah. But folks, it gets even worse. After Trump was found guilty this week of 34 felonies, McGuire announced he was contributing $300,000 of his own money to help elect Trump. And he published a screed on Twitter claiming that this is the most important election of his lifetime. In it, McGuire explains how he supported Hillary Clinton in 2016, but has since underwent a, quote, radicalization to the center, which, given that Hillary Clinton is the center, what McGuire really means is a radicalization into a neocon, because he goes on to criticize the Biden administration for the one good thing it did, end the war in Afghanistan. McGuire whined, quote, we gave up one of the most strategic air bases in the world and arguably stability in Kabul for political gain to be able to say that President Biden ended the war in Afghanistan. Just a factual point there. We didn't give up the so-called most strategic air base in the world in Kabul. We got run out of the country by the dang Taliban. And the full withdrawal from Afghanistan was actually set in motion by Trump, though he didn't have the guts to do it himself. McGuire then attacks Biden for not being more aggressive toward Iran, claiming, quote, the Biden administration has been rewarding Iran by unfreezing their funds, mourning the death of President Raisi, and hamstringing Israel in its proxy battle. What does he want to see instead? Full-blown war? Because the U.S. would probably get its ass kicked. McGuire also ranted about how Trump has been treated very unfairly and that Democrats rigged the 2020 election. He does admit that he disagrees with Trump on one issue, abortion, but McGuire quickly wipes away that disagreement by saying actually Republicans are right on the issue. He writes, quote, where do I disagree with Republicans? The number one area is abortion. This is obviously a lightning rod issue. As someone with libertarian-leaning views, I believe the Republicans have the wrong stance around imposing their views on others. That said, I think Democrats misunderstand the constitutional argument that this should be a state's issue. You see, as a libertarian, I'm against the federal government telling people what they can and can't do with their bodies. However, I do support state governments and their police forces doing the same thing. This guy is an incoherent clown. It's an interesting feeling to have the whole world protesting against you when you know they're manipulated and wrong. Yes, of course, the old, surely I'm not the problem. It's the rest of the world that is the problem. A view that's common among his class. McGuire's post was praised by prominent reactionaries like Charlie Kirk and libs of TikTok, confirming the budding alliance between the far right and Silicon Valley oligarchs. And fellow dipshit investor David Sachs, no relation, shared McGuire's post and tweeted, quote, after Biden's disastrous presidency, Trump has a lot of supporters in Silicon Valley. Many are just afraid to admit it, but with each act of courage like this one, the dam begins to break. Wow, a bunch of extremely wealthy libertarians who love Israel and want to bomb Iran support the Republican candidate. So courageous. Sean McGuire, you have bad politics and way too much money to blow on useless shit no one needs, including Donald Trump. And for that, you're this week's Rich Dick. Okay, friends, the show ends with a sunrise from Maryland. It was sent in by Charles in Silver Spring. Enjoy. Thank you, Charles. Show's over. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV, subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and follow us on social media. One day capitalism will fall. I promise it will. Until then, we're going to be right here. See you next week.